The alarm clock siren went off at 5:30 a.m., as it had every morning for the past 15 years. Angela Renee Field slowly opened her eyes, feeling the familiar weight of fatigue that had become her constant companion. The apartment in the Green, a valley neighborhood of Portland, was still shrouded in the darkness of the Oregon winter. "Mom, where's my school shirt?" The voice of Luke, her 15-year-old son, sounded from the hallway before she could even get up. "It's on the clothesline in the laundry room," she responded automatically, while trying to organize her thoughts for another day of work at Grace Memorial Hospital. In the kitchen, she found Megan, her 17-year-old daughter, hunched over a biology book. "Do you have a test today?" she asked, starting to prepare coffee. "SATs are coming up, Mom. I need to study," the girl replied, without taking her eyes off the book. Angela felt a pang of pride mixed with concern. Megan had decided to follow in her footsteps in medicine. As she prepared the toast, her thoughts drifted to Richard, her ex-husband. 3 years had passed since the divorce, but the marks were still there, especially in the bills that piled up and the absence that the children felt. "God, give me strength," she murmured automatically, a prayer that had long since lost its real meaning. At the hospital, the routine was always intense. As head nurse of the ICU, Angela coordinated a team of 12 professionals and dealt daily with life or death situations. That morning especially, something seemed different. An inexplicable uneasiness had accompanied her since she woke up. "Miss Angela, are you okay?" asked Mrs. Zelda, an elderly patient who had been hospitalized for 2 weeks. "I am. Why?" she replied, trying to smile. "It's just that today you have a different light around you. It seems like something important is going to happen," said the lady who was known for her accurate intuitions. During lunch, Angela received a message from Megan. "Mom, I'm going to sleep at Julie's house tonight to study, okay?" She automatically replied yes, but something inside her wanted to say no. That uneasiness increased with each hour. In the afternoon, during a coffee break, she met Father Paul, the hospital chaplain, in the hallway. "Angela, how long since I've seen you in church?" he commented in his serene way. "I've been busy, Father, and honestly, sometimes I wonder if God still hears my prayers," she confessed, surprised by her own honesty. The priest looked at her attentively. "You know, Angela, sometimes God needs to shake us to show us that He has always been there." She forced a smile, but the words kept echoing in her mind. At 7 p.m., her shift ended. In the locker room, as she changed out of her uniform, her colleague, Sandra, commented on the weather. "There's a storm brewing, Angela. Be careful." She nodded, grabbing the keys to her car, a silver Honda Civic she had bought used the previous year. As she left the hospital, the rain was already falling heavily. Angela sent a message to Luke. "Son, there's dinner ready in the microwave. I'll be home in 30 minutes. It would be her last message that day. As she drove down Pine Street, her thoughts were scattered between worries about the children, bills to pay, and that strange feeling that wouldn't leave her. The radio played softly a gospel song she barely paid attention to. "God is in control." That's when it all happened. At the intersection with Oak Avenue, a truck ran a red light. Angela only had time to see the lights approaching. The impact was violent, the world spun, and then came the silence. Her last conscious thought was a genuine prayer, the first in a long time. "Lord, don't let me die. My children need me." And then darkness enveloped her. Time lost its meaning. The pain disappeared. Angela felt herself floating as if her body had lost all weight. The darkness was gradually replaced by a soft, welcoming light, different from anything she had experienced in her 42 years of life. Suddenly, she was aware of a presence. She couldn't see a defined form, but she felt a love so intense and pure that tears began to flow, or would have flowed if she were still in her physical body. It was as if every cell of her being was being filled with an indescribable peace. "Angela," a voice called. It wasn't a sound her ears picked up, but a vibration that resonated in her soul. She knew instantly. It was Jesus. Not the Jesus from church images, but a living, real presence, overflowing with love and wisdom. "Come," he said, and without moving, Angela found herself in a place that seemed infinite. Around her, millions of threads of light intertwined, forming a cosmic tapestry of indescribable beauty. Each thread pulsed with its own life, some more intense, others fainter. "What is this?" she asked, though she already felt the answer in her heart. "These are the prayers of humanity," Jesus replied. "Each thread is a prayer, a thought directed to the divine. Observe." He guided her closer, and Angela could see clearly. One particularly bright thread caught her attention. It was the prayer of a mother for her child fighting cancer. That woman's love and faith were so intense that they created waves of light that expanded, touching other lives. "See your own prayers," Jesus indicated. Angela saw threads that came from her life, some strong and luminous from moments of true connection with God, but many were weak, almost transparent, reflecting her automatic and unconvincing prayers. With sadness, she recognized her recent prayers, hasty requests, complaints disguised as prayers, empty words said out of habit. I'm sorry," she murmured, ashamed. "There is no condemnation in love," Jesus responded tenderly, "but I need to show you something important." The scene changed, and Angela found herself observing moments from her own life. She saw herself caring for patients in the hospital, and for the first time realized how her presence, even when she wasn't consciously praying, brought comfort and hope. She saw her children, Megan and Luke, and how her prayers for them, even the simplest ones, created an invisible field of protection. Prayer is not just words, Jesus explained. It's a state of being, a constant connection with the divine. When you pray with truth, you become a channel of light for the world. Angela watched in wonder as the prayers connected, forming networks of light that enveloped the entire earth. She saw how a simple prayer could trigger a series of events that affected countless lives. "But why show me this now?" she asked. "Because you have a choice to make," Jesus replied. "Your body is fighting to survive. The doctors have been trying to revive you for almost 8 minutes. You can choose to stay here in perfect peace and love, or return with a mission." Angela's heart tightened at the thought of her children. What mission? To teach others what you've seen here. To show that prayer is not an empty ritual, but a vital force that connects heaven and earth. To show that each person is more powerful than they imagine when they truly connect with God. Angela felt the weight of the decision. The peace she felt here was indescribable, but the love for her children and the possibility of making a real difference in the world called her back. "I want to go back," she said with conviction. Jesus smiled. "Remember, true prayer is not about right words or rituals. It's about love, truth, and connection. You'll understand more when you return." Before she could respond, Angela felt herself being pulled back. The light began to dissipate, but the love and peace remained. The last words she heard were, "I have always been with you and I always will be." The first sound Angela heard was the rhythmic beep of the heart monitor. Her eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the fluorescent light of the operating room. The voices around her were familiar. They were her own co-workers. "She's coming back," exclaimed Dr. Robert, the chief surgeon she had known for over a decade. "Angela, can you hear us?" She tried to speak, but her throat was dry from intubation. Her eyes found the clock on the wall. 8:17 p.m. Exactly 8 minutes had passed since the moment of the accident. Sandra, her friend and fellow nurse, held her hand with tears in her eyes. "You gave us quite a scare. Your heart stopped for almost 8 minutes. It was a miracle. A miracle." Yes, it had been much more than that. The memories of the experience she had just had were vivid in her mind, with a clarity that defied any rational explanation. Every detail, every word, every sensation, everything was engraved in her soul with impressive sharpness. The next few hours were a whirlwind of exams, procedures, and visits. Megan and Luke arrived at the hospital in tears, accompanied by her sister Beth, who had been called to take care of them. Seeing her children was like a balm, and also a confirmation that she had made the right choice in deciding to come back. "Mom, I thought I'd lost you," sobbed Megan, holding her hand tightly. Luke, always more restrained, just hugged her in. Silence, but Angela could feel his body trembling. As the night progressed and her condition stabilized, Angela began to notice something different. It was as if she could feel the prayers of the people around her, not just hear them or imagine them, but really feel them like those threads of light she had seen during her experience. When Mrs. Zelda, from the room next door, prayed her nightly rosary, Angela could see a soft golden glow emanating through the wall. When Father Paul came to visit her the next morning, she noticed a bluish aura around him as he prayed. "You're different, Angela," the priest commented, observing her closely. "There's a light in your eyes that wasn't there before." She smiled, knowing it was time to start sharing her experience. "Father, I need to tell you something important, something that happened during those 8 minutes." And so, for the first time, Angela began to narrate her journey. The priest listened attentively, his eyes widening as she described the tapestry of prayers and the encounter with Jesus. When she finished, he remained silent for a few moments. "You know, Angela," he finally said, "throughout my 30 years, as a priest I've heard several accounts of near-death experiences, but there's something different about your case, something that touches a profound truth about the nature of prayer that many of us, religious people, sometimes forget." In the days that followed, as she recovered in the hospital, Angela began to realize that her experience had not been just for her. It was a gift that needed to be shared, a message that needed to be transmitted. The news of her experience began to spread through the hospital. Patients and staff passed by her room, some skeptical, others curious, but all left different after talking to her. There was something in her gaze, in her words, that touched people in a special way. One afternoon, while talking to a young nurse who was going through a crisis of faith, Angela felt that familiar presence, the same unconditional love she had experienced during her experience. The words flowed naturally, and she saw the young woman's eyes fill with tears of understanding. "It's like you can see inside my soul," said the nurse, moved. Angela smiled, remembering Jesus' words. "True prayer is not about right words or rituals. It's about love, truth, and connection." The return home 2 weeks after the accident marked the beginning of a new phase in Angela's life. The apartment in Green Valley seemed different now. Each room held memories of old prayers, and she could feel the accumulated energy of years of prayers, some deep, others superficial. Megan and Luke had prepared a small reception. "Welcome back, Mom," said Luke, hugging her tightly. On the living room table, a handmade poster said, "Our warrior is back." Angela felt tears in her eyes, not just for the demonstration of love, but because now she could clearly see the threads of light that connected their hearts. "You can't imagine how your prayers kept me alive," she said, sitting on the couch. Megan and Luke exchanged curious glances. It was the first time she had mentioned anything about her experience to her children. "What do you mean, Mom?" asked Megan, sitting beside her. "What exactly happened that day?" Angela took a deep breath. It was time to share her experience with the most important people in her life. As she narrated her journey, she noticed how her children's expressions changed, from initial disbelief to fascination, and finally, to understanding. "So every time I prayed asking for you to be okay," Luke began, his voice choked. "I could see it, son. It was like a thread of golden light that enveloped me, giving me strength to come back," Angela completed, holding both their hands. In the days that followed, the transformation in their home was remarkable. The prayers before meals, which were once hurried and automatic, became special moments of connection. Angela taught her children to perceive the energy of gratitude, the power of love in every word directed to God. One night, while helping Megan with her SAT studies, her daughter made a confession. "Mom, since your accident, I've started praying in a different way. I can't explain it, but it's like I really feel that someone is listening." Angela smiled, recognizing in her daughter's words the awakening of a deeper spiritual awareness. "Prayer is like a conversation with your best friend, Megan. It doesn't have to be formal or full of fancy words. What matters is the truth in your heart." The change was also reflected in her work. After a month of recovery, Angela returned to the hospital, but now with a new perspective. Her presence in the ICU brought a peace that patients and colleagues could feel, even without fully understanding. Sandra, her nurse friend, was one of the first to notice. "There's something different about you, Angela. It's like you bring light wherever you go." It was during a particularly difficult shift that Angela realized the true extent of her transformation. A young man had been admitted to the ICU after a suicide attempt. As she cared for him, Angela could see the darkness surrounding him, but she also perceived small points of light, the prayers of his family, who waited anxiously in the waiting room. Holding the hand of the unconscious young man, she began to pray. These weren't the protocol prayers she used to make before, but a deep connection with the divine energy she had experienced. Gradually, she saw the points of light expand, creating a network of protection around him. The next morning, to the surprise of the medical team, the young man woke up. His first eyes met Angela's. "I saw," he whispered. "I saw the light when you prayed for me." The news of this miraculous recovery spread quickly through the hospital. Soon, other health professionals began to seek out Angela, asking for guidance on how to incorporate spirituality into their care. "It's not about religion," she explained. "It's about recognizing that we are all connected by something greater than ourselves." At home, the changes continued. Luke, who had always been more skeptical about spirituality, began to show interest in conversations about faith. One night, she found him in his room, trying to meditate. "How do you know when you're really connected, Mom?" he asked. "It's like that moment when you're playing guitar," she replied, referring to her son's hobby. "You know when you forget about time, space, and there's only music? True prayer is like that, a moment of perfect attunement with something greater than yourself." Angela's transformation began to attract attention from people beyond her immediate circle. Father Paul invited her to give a testimony at the church, and soon she was giving lectures at hospitals and support groups, sharing her experience and teaching about the transformative power of conscious prayer. But it was on an ordinary afternoon, while watering the plants on the balcony, that Angela had one of the deepest realizations since her experience. Watching a drop of water run down the leaf of a fern, she understood that her transformation wasn't just about prayer. It was about being completely present in every moment, recognizing the sacred in the simplest things in life. Not all transformations are easily accepted. 3 months after her return to work, Angela faced her first major challenge. Dr. Max, the hospital's clinical director, had called a meeting with her after receiving complaints from some doctors. "Angela, you know I respect you very much as a professional," he began, adjusting his glasses uncomfortably. "But some colleagues are concerned about your, how can I say, spiritual approach with patients." She had been expecting this. Since her return, her way of working had changed drastically. It wasn't something she forced. It just happened naturally. Her presence brought a peace that patients could feel, and many specifically asked for her care. "Dr. Max, has my work, has a nurse been compromised at any point?" she asked, maintaining the calm that now seemed natural in her life. "No, not at all. In fact, your patients' recovery rates have improved significantly, but you know how traditional medicine is. Some colleagues are questioning your methods." At home that night, Angela shared her concern with Megan and Luke during dinner. "It's frustrating to know that something so beautiful can be viewed with suspicion," she sighed. "Mom," said Megan, surprising her with her maturity, "remember what you told me about true prayer, that it transcends words. Maybe it's time to show that at the hospital in a way they can understand." Luke, who was quieter than usual, added, "You know that sociology paper I'm doing on integrative medicine? I found several scientific studies on the impact of spirituality on patient recovery." That conversation lit a spark in Angela's heart. The next morning, she sought out Dr. Robert, the surgeon who had participated in her resuscitation. He had always shown more openness to spiritual matters. "What if we did a study?" she proposed. "Something scientific, documenting the results of patients who receive more holistic care, including the spiritual aspect." The doctor looked at her with interest. "Go on. We could compare recovery rates, length of hospital stay, use of pain medication." All documented objectively. Dr. Robert scratched his chin thoughtfully. You know, this reminds me of an article I read recently about neuroscience and meditation. Science is beginning to understand what spiritual traditions have always known. The project began to take shape. With the support of Dr. Robert and other interested professionals, Angela initiated a pilot study in the ICU, but her biggest challenge wasn't scientific, it was personal. Richard, her ex-husband, had learned about her near-death experience through mutual friends and scheduled a meeting to talk. They hadn't seen each other in months since he had moved to New York with his new family. The meeting took place in a cafe at the Galleria Mall. As soon as she saw him entering, Angela noticed something different. There was an aura of sadness around him, mixed with regret. "Angela, I heard about the accident," he began awkwardly. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" "You changed your number, Richard, and honestly, at that moment, our children needed stability, not more drama." He lowered, his eyes ashamed. "But is it true? Everyone's talking about your experience, about how you've changed." Angela took a deep breath, feeling that familiar presence that now always accompanied her. "Yes, it's true. And you know what I learned? That sometimes we need to die to really start living." The conversation that followed was deep and transformative for both of them. Richard confessed that his new marriage was in crisis, that he regretted many choices. For the first time, Angela could feel true humility in his words. Do you think God can forgive me?" he asked with tears in his eyes. "Richard, God never stopped loving you. Forgiveness already exists. You just need to be ready to accept it." As she walked back home, Angela reflected on how the challenges she faced were actually opportunities for growth. At the hospital, the initial resistance to her new way of working was making room for a deeper dialogue about the integration of science and spirituality. At home, her children were flourishing in unexpected ways. Megan had started a study group that combined SAT preparation with moments of reflection and meditation. Luke, in turn, was composing songs that spoke of transformation and rebirth. At night, sitting on her porch watching the city lights, Angela smiled as she remembered Jesus' words during her experience. True prayer is not about the right words or rituals, it's about love, truth, and connection. Now she understood. Each challenge was an opportunity to transform theory into practice, to show that true spirituality doesn't oppose science or reason, it complements and elevates them. The New York winter was especially harsh that morning when Angela received news that would once again change the course of her story. Sophie, a 12-year-old girl, had been admitted to the ICU in critical condition after a complication from a rare autoimmune disease. "The doctors have tried everything," Sandra explained as they observed the girl through the ICU window. "Her mother is desperate, hasn't left that chapel since she arrived." Angela felt that familiar calling in her heart. As she approached Sophie's bedside, she could see the threads of light. They were weak, almost imperceptible, but they were there. The girl's mother's prayers created a thin, protective net around her. Mary, Sophie's mother, was kneeling in the small hospital chapel when Angela found her. Her red and swollen eyes betrayed sleepless nights. "Are you the nurse who—" Mary hesitated, wiping away tears. "People are talking about you, about your experience. Please help me. My daughter is all I have." At that moment, Angela felt that familiar presence, the same unconditional love she had experienced during her near-death experience. The words flowed naturally. "Mary, your prayers are more powerful than you imagine, but sometimes we need to learn to pray in a different way." Over the next few hours, Angela taught Mary about what she had learned. Not just about prayer, but about the deep connection between mother and daughter, about how that love could be a channel for healing. "Close your eyes," Angela guided. "Now don't think about the words. Feel the love you have for Sophie. Let that love fill every cell of your body." As she guided Mary through this process, Angela could see the threads of light strengthening, becoming brighter. It was as if each of Mary's heartbeats sent waves of golden light towards the ICU. Dr. Robert, who was passing by the chapel at that moment, stopped to observe the scene. He had become an important ally in the research project on spirituality and healing, but he was still surprised by what he witnessed. In the following hours, something extraordinary began to happen. Sophie's vital signs, which had been critical, began to gradually stabilize. The fever, which hadn't broken for days, began to come down. "It's impossible," muttered Dr. Marcus, checking the tests. "The inflammatory markers are decreasing without any change in treatment." Angela smiled internally. She could see what the doctors couldn't. The network of light around Sophie had become strong and vibrant, fueled by her mother's love and renewed faith. The next morning, Sophie opened her eyes for the first time in a week. Her first word was "Mom," whispered with a small smile. The news of Sophie's miraculous recovery spread quickly through the hospital. Dr. Marcus, who had previously questioned Angela's methods, was now intrigued. "I can't scientifically explain what happened," he admitted during a team meeting, "but the results speak for themselves." Sophie's case became a milestone in the study that Angela and Dr. Robert were conducting. More professionals began to take an interest in the integration between traditional medicine and spiritual care. At home during dinner, Megan made an insightful observation. "Mom, you're not just healing bodies, you're healing the way people see faith." Luke, who was finalizing a new song, added, "You know that feeling when a song hits exactly the right note? That's how I see your work now, Mom. It's like you help people find their perfect frequency." That night, alone in her room, Angela reflected on how her own healing had become a channel for the healing of others. It wasn't about performing miracles. It was about helping people reconnect with something that had always been within them. "True healing begins in the soul," she wrote in her journal. "And prayer is the bridge that reconnects us with our divine essence." An unexpected letter arrived on a Thursday morning. The brown envelope, with the letterhead of a well-known hospital in New York, caught Angela's attention as soon as she removed it from the mailbox. Inside, a formal invitation to participate in an international congress on integrative medicine and spirituality. "It's a unique opportunity," commented Dr. Robert when she showed him the invitation. "Your work here has been catching the attention of important people in the medical field." But it wasn't the invitation that made Angela's heart race. It was the name of the event organizer, Dr. Alexander Matthews, her father, whom she hadn't spoken to in over 20 years. "You never told me much about your father," said Megan that night as she helped her mother prepare dinner. "Why did you grow apart?" Angela took a deep breath, feeling it was time to share this part of her story. "Your grandfather was a brilliant doctor, but also very skeptical. When I decided to become a nurse and started to get interested in the spiritual dimension of healing, he considered it an affront to science." "And now he's organizing a congress on spirituality?" Luke asked, entering the kitchen. "People change," Angela replied, remembering Jesus' words during her experience. "True transformation begins when we allow ourselves to see beyond our certainties." The decision to accept the invitation wasn't easy. The Congress would be in 2 weeks, and Angela knew that meeting her father after so long would be a test for everything she had learned about forgiveness and unconditional love. On the eve of the trip, while packing her suitcase, Angela found an old photo album. In one of the photos, yellowed by time, she and her father smiled in front of New York Presbyterian Hospital, where he worked. She must have been about 12 at the time. "It was on that day that I decided to be a nurse," she murmured to herself, remembering how fascinated she was watching her father care for patients. The trip to New York was full of reflections. On the plane, Angela began to notice something she hadn't noticed before. Small threads of light connected all the people, even those who seemed distant or disconnected. The Congress was being held at the Javits Convention Center. As she entered the main auditorium, Angela felt her heart race. There he was, Dr. Alexander Matthews, his hair now completely white, but with the same keen eyes she remembered. Their eyes met, and for a moment time seemed to stop. Angela could clearly see the threads of light that connected them. They were weak, worn by years of silence, but they still existed. "Angela," he said, approaching with hesitant steps. "You came?" "Dad," she replied, feeling tears form in her eyes. "Why? Why now?" He led her to a private room, away from the curious glances of the Congress participants. There, Dr. Alexander revealed his own story of transformation. 6 months ago, I had a heart attack, he began. During the surgery, I also had an experience. I saw a light, felt an inexplicable peace, and you were there, showing me something I had refused to see throughout my life. Angela felt her heart tighten. Tears were now flowing freely down her face. When I heard about your accident, about your work at the hospital, about the lives you've been touching, I realized it was time to acknowledge that there's something greater than our limited scientific understanding. The hug that followed was like a bridge being rebuilt over a 2-decade chasm. Angela could see the threads of light around them strengthening, intertwining in patterns of healing and reconciliation. There's something else you need to know, said Dr. Alexander, wiping away his own tears. Your work has inspired a change in the entire hospital where I work. We're implementing an integrative care program, uniting science and spirituality. Like what Jesus showed me, Angela murmured. The tapestry of light where everything is connected. Her father looked at her curiously, and she began to share her experience, not as an invited speaker at a congress, but as a daughter sharing her heart with her father. As she spoke, Angela realized that this reconciliation was part of something bigger. It was further confirmation that true prayers are always answered, even if not in the way or time we expect. The auditorium of the Javits Convention Center was packed the following morning. More than 1,000 health professionals eagerly awaited the joint lecture by Dr. Alexander Matthews and his daughter, Angela Fields. The buzz ceased when they took the stage side by side. Throughout my career as a doctor, Dr. Alexander began, I believed that science and spirituality were opposing forces. Today, alongside my daughter, I come to share how wrong I was. When it was her turn to speak, Angela felt that familiar presence, the same unconditional love that had accompanied her since her experience. Looking at the audience, she could see threads of light connecting each person present, some more intense, others fainter. Medicine treats the body, but true healing happens at levels that our most sophisticated equipment can't measure, she said. Each of you has already felt this, that inexplicable moment when a patient recovers against all odds, guided by something that transcends our understanding. As she shared her near-death experience and the transformations that followed, Angela noticed subtle changes in the energy of the auditorium. It was as if a wave of light was spreading through the audience, awakening dormant memories and intuitions in each professional present. Dr. Robert, who had traveled from New York to participate in the Congress, watched in amazement. He could feel that he was witnessing the beginning of something revolutionary in American medicine. During the question session, a young resident stood up. How can we integrate this spiritual approach without compromising scientific rigor? It was Dr. Alexander who answered, True science doesn't fear the unknown, it investigates it. What my daughter shows us is not a denial of science, but its expansion into dimensions that we are just beginning to understand. During the Congress break, Angela was surprised by a call from Megan. Mum, you won't believe it. I got first place in medicine at Columbia. Tears came instantly. Honey, that's wonderful. And there's more, Megan continued, her voice choked with emotion. I've decided I want to follow in your footsteps. I want to study the integration between medicine and spirituality from the beginning of my training. That night, during dinner, with her father at a traditional New York restaurant, Angela received another surprising news. New York Presbyterian Hospital was creating an integrative medicine center, and they wanted her to coordinate the project along with her father. It would be a chance for us to work together, to unite science and spirituality in a way that could influence the formation of a whole new generation of doctors, Dr. Alexander explained. The proposal was tempting, but Angela felt that her mission in New York wasn't complete yet. That's when she had an idea. What if, instead of moving here, we created a network of integrated hospitals? We could develop a program that would unite the scientific knowledge from here with the spiritual work we've developed in New York. Her father's eyes sparkled, Like a tapestry of light connecting different healing centers? Exactly, Angela smiled, moved to see her father using the same metaphor that Jesus had shown her. During the flight back to New York, Angela reflected on how her near-death experience had triggered a transformation that now expanded far beyond her personal life. It was as if each challenge, each reconciliation, each healing was part of a larger plan. Upon arriving home, she found Luke playing guitar on the porch. The song he was composing spoke of bridges between worlds, of light and transformation. "That's she commented, sitting down next to her son. "It was inspired by you, Mom," he replied. "You know, since you came back from those 8 minutes, it's as if you brought a piece of heaven with you." Angela smiled, remembering Jesus' words. Prayer is not just a request, it's an act of creation. Now she fully understood. Each life touched, each heart transformed, was part of a great prayer in action, a movement of love that expanded infinitely. A year had passed since the accident that changed Angela's life. The integration project between the New York and Columbia hospitals was flourishing, transforming the lives of patients and healthcare professionals. But on that specific morning, something different hung in the air. Angela woke up with a familiar sensation, the same restlessness she had felt on the day of her accident. As she opened her bedroom curtains, she noticed that the New York sky was painted with surreal shades of pink and gold. "Mom, are you okay?" asked Megan, who was now in her first year of medical school. "You seem distant today." "I am," Angela replied, trying to smile. "I just had a different dream." In the dream, Jesus had appeared again, showing her a new tapestry of light. But this time she could see something. More, thousands of people in different hospitals, all connected by golden threads of conscious prayer. At the hospital, her routine began normally until Sandra came running into the nurse's room. "Angela, you need to see this." On the reception, TV, a news report showed something extraordinary. In different parts of the country, people reported seeing unexplained lights in the skies during their prayers. Scientists were trying to explain the phenomenon with theories about out-of-season auroras, but Angela knew it was the physical manifestation of what she had seen in her experience. "It's as if the veil between worlds was thinner," commented Father Paul, who had come to visit a patient. "People are beginning to see what you've always told us about." During her rounds in the ICU, Angela found Mrs. Zulmira, who still worked as a volunteer at the hospital even after her recovery. "You're seeing it too, aren't you?" the lady asked. "The threads of light are stronger today." Indeed, Angela could see the prayer threads with impressive clarity. It was as if the entire network of light that connected people was becoming visible not just to her, but to everyone who was truly attentive. At home, during dinner, Luke shared something surprising. "Mum, remember that song I composed about your experience? Today, while I was playing in the park, several people came to tell me they could see the notes as threads of light in the air." Megan, who had inherited both her mother's sensitivity and her grandfather's scientific rigor, added, "At college, we're starting a research project on the physical manifestations of prayer energy. It's amazing how science is finally developing instruments to measure what you've always described." That night, Angela received an unexpected call from her father. "Daughter, you need to come to New York immediately. Something is happening at New York Presbyterian Hospital, something you need to see in person." Without hesitation, Angela booked a flight for the next morning. Before going to sleep, she knelt to pray, as she had done every night since her experience. But this time, something was different. Words weren't necessary. She could literally see her prayers joining an ever-growing stream of light that seemed to envelop the entire planet. "It's beginning," she whispered to herself, remembering Jesus' words. "True prayer is an act of creation." Her room, Megan found an old journal of her mother's, written shortly after the accident. On the last page there was a note that seemed prophetic. "One day, everyone will see what I saw. One day the tapestry of light will not just be a vision, but a shared reality for all. And on that day, true healing will begin." The flight to New York seemed different this time. Through the airplane window, Angela could clearly see the threads, of light connecting the cities below, like a golden web covering all of the United States. Next to her, a little boy of about 5 pointed out the window. "Mommy, look how pretty. The sky is full of lines of light." Upon landing at LaGuardia, her father was already waiting for her. On the way to New York Presbyterian Hospital, Dr. Alexander could barely contain his excitement. "You won't believe what's happening, honey. It's as if everything you told us about is materializing." When they arrived at the hospital, Angela understood the reason for the urgent call. The entire building was enveloped in a visible golden aura, and the corridors were filled with people. Patients, doctors, nurses, visitors, all could see the threads of light from prayers. "It started yesterday afternoon," her father explained. "Suddenly everyone began to see what only you could see before. It's as if a portal had opened." In the hospital chapel, Angela found dozens of people gathered in prayer. The most impressive thing was that now everyone could see how their prayers intertwined, forming complex patterns of light that expanded far beyond the walls of the hospital. It was then that she felt that familiar presence. Jesus was there. But this time it wasn't just her who could see him. Everyone in the chapel fell into reverent silence when his luminous figure materialized in the center of the room. "The time has come," his voice resonated, not just in their ears but in the hearts of all present. "The veil that separated the worlds is being lifted. What was once visible to few will now be revealed to all." Angela finally understood the full purpose of her near-death experience. She hadn't been chosen just to share a message, but to be a bridge preparing people for this moment of collective awakening. Her phone rang. It was Megan. "Mom, it's happening here too. In Chicago, all over the States, the whole world. People are seeing the threads of light. They're understanding the real power of prayer." On social media, thousands of videos showed the phenomenon. Scientists, religious leaders, and skeptics were uniting in a quest to understand what was happening. But for Angela, the explanation was simple. Humanity was finally ready to see the truth that had always been there. In the operating room, surgeons reported being able to see their patients' vital energy. In the ICU, nurses witnessed how prayers literally altered the energy patterns of the sick. Medicine and spirituality were no longer separate fields. They were one and the same. "It's more than I ever imagined," said Dr. Alexander, embracing his daughter with tears in his eyes. "Tayu tried to explain it to us, but seeing is different," Angela completed, smiling. "But you know what's most important? It's not just seeing. It's understanding that we've always been connected, always been part of this great web of light." That night, an even more extraordinary phenomenon occurred. In all the hospitals that were part of the integrative medicine network that Angela and her father had created, patients began to heal in inexplicable ways. These weren't miracles in the traditional sense. It was the power of conscious and collective prayer manifesting in visible and measurable ways. Luke called emotional. "Mom, remember that song I composed? They're playing it on all the radio stations. People say they can literally see the notes turning into light." A week later, Angela was back at the same intersection where she had had the accident a year before. But now, instead of fear or sadness, she felt only gratitude. Looking at the sky, she could see the most beautiful and complex tapestry of light she had ever witnessed, millions of prayers intertwining, creating patterns of healing and transformation that stretched to the horizon. "Now everyone can see," she whispered, remembering those 8 minutes that had changed not just her life, but the entire world. The truth about prayer was never a secret. We were just waiting for the right moment to see it. And so what began as a personal near-death experience transformed into a global awakening. The great revelation wasn't just about seeing threads of light or witnessing miraculous healings. It was about humanity finally understanding its true nature, beings of light connected to each other and to the divine by bonds that had always existed, just waiting to be recognized. Angela knew that this wasn't the end, but just the beginning of a new era, an era in which science and spirituality, reason and faith, visible and invisible, would finally unite in a sacred dance of healing and transformation. And somewhere, amidst the tapestry of light that everyone could now see, she felt Jesus smiling. knowing that his mission was fulfilled, not just hers but all of humanity's, to finally recognize the transformative power of true prayer.